Hello and good morning on Broadcasting Scotland. We're here with the full Scottish. With us today is Ronnie Cowan. He's the MP for Inverclyde. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon.
Yeah, we're kind of right on the verge now
crisp.
and just passing over. Right, we've got a couple of topics to discuss today, and I would like to start with how my morning started, which was looking on my Facebook stream and seeing a little picture of a yellow rubber hammer on sale for €5. So we would like to start talking about Operation Yellowhammer.
Okay.
There has been a leak to the Times, and they've published the entire emergency preparation papers from the British government for this no-deal Brexit. It's quite an embarrassing paper.
There's different angles to this. There's nothing new. We all knew this is where we were going. We've been saying it for the best part of the last 2 years. We all knew there were trouble with transport, there was shortage of medicines, the difficulties distributing food through borders, through the transport difficulties with HGV licences. We could go on and on. We all knew this was coming. The only people who were in denial about it were the UK government. So, to an extent, they're saying, well, we're planning for no Brexit. We're planning for it, but they're not going to stop it happening. And what we've seen now is that the plans that have been put in place, the depths of those plans that are required to keep the United Kingdom functioning are just astronomical. And the damage which could be caused is out there now. And they've got to admit that, we're making plans to stop these things happen. The fact they have to make those plans means there's a doubt there in their mind that could potentially happen. And up until now, they've been denying that.
It's quite interesting because this is the second time that Yellowhammer has had a leak surrounding it. The first time was just before the first supposed Brexit date in March, and there was a leak that outlined that the UK was in quite deep trouble, that many measures hadn't been taken, even measures that reappear in the report again today, and people still pretend like we're surprised. The government still pretends like it wasn't informed. I think Philippa Whitford had a very angry moment yesterday when she realised that the same thing that she has been, one of the things that she's been very active and vocal about was cancer prevention.
Philip's been talking about radioactive isotopes a lot and saying the life on those means you have to have them available right there and then. You can't store them up. We've been told all sorts of things. We're storing up, we're increasing our supplies, we can keep these things in the background, but you cannot do it with those that particular technology, which is used to treat cancer. And now we're hearing there's an issue with it. And for 1-2 years, we've been banging on to this, and the attitude has always been, I've noticed particularly with Chris Grayling, who was in charge of transport, because I'm in the select committee for transport, and his continual attitude has been echoed throughout the previous government and this government. It will be all right on the night. That's all they've said to us, and clearly that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, it's astonishing that anybody could think that confidence alone could keep a country afloat.
Well, that's it. It's red, white and blue Brexit. That's put your faith in us, and we'll all sing songs together and hold hands, and that Dunkirk spirit. All this sort of stuff has been used, and it means absolutely nothing if you physically cannot get things in a van, transport them across Europe and across borders and into our country to make sure people have got the supplies they require. In the case of leaks, politicians and committees sort of leak all the time. The question is it deliberately been leaked? Is this a taster? Put it out there, see how people react to it? Or is it genuinely someone who's looked at this and thought, oh my goodness me, the country needs to know this? But politicians in Westminster in particular leaks all the time.
Yeah, they definitely do. It's just interesting that there's a change where we're now coming up not just against the laws of a civil society, but like the laws of actual physics. We're coming up against proper realities, gravity and that kind of stuff, where you just can't argue, but they still try.
Yeah.
What's that like from a closer up perspective as an MP?
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things they will argue till they're blue in the face that they can change the laws of physics, but clearly they can't. So yeah, they've got themselves into this situation. 31st of October, it's getting awfully close. It's looming very large in the window, and everybody's saying, what's the plan? What are we going to do here?
I still find it hard to believe that the first Independent Day would have been the 1st of April, and now we're leaving on Halloween. I know it's a minor little thing, but how those dates came about is just...
Somebody's writing the script.
And I hope they're having fun, because sure, none of us are.
You do wonder. And it's actually a serious point, because you do wonder who looks at this stuff, who proofreads it, who is in the room when these decisions are made, and nobody's saying, just a minute, actually, 1st of April, bad day, Halloween. Even the simplest things like that. There's no sort of self-awareness, no self-check that says we could do this differently. It seems to be, somebody gets an idea and they charge ahead with it, and this idea of bravado and courage is what will carry us all through. And what we need is reality checks.
It's actually interesting because while you were speaking, I realised that it's the very same thing in the US with the politics of bravado. What is it in the public that responds to that kind of attitude?
It's big banner politics. It's get a message, say it loud and clear, and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And people like the idea of that message, and you don't want them to dig behind it and say, yeah, but what's the substance behind this? And you say, Trump did it majorly in the USA, and now they need to kind of the same attitude with Boris Johnson. Just make a big message, make it loud, make it clear, and keep on going down that line. People start questioning you, double down on it and do it again, do it stronger. And it's a very dangerous way to go down when you know that behind those policies there's no substance at all.
Do you think that we'll come out of this eventually, hopefully, more educated and more prepared for this kind of politician? I feel like it's been a while.
Do we learn from our lessons? We're not seeing that so far, are we? Well, I mean, we've been being very political about it. People in Scotland have got an alternative choice. So we can walk away from this. We can say, let's be an independent country and do our own thing. That's the lesson maybe we have to learn from this. Scotland making decisions for the people of Scotland.
I mean, you don't have to convince me, and I think it's a very convincing argument. I also believe that quite a lot of people will have come much closer to the yes side because of Brexit. I mean, that is half the strategy that I perceive in the Scottish government. But
well, there is that possible scenario, but in reality of it is we do not want to hurt the United Kingdom and within that the people of Scotland to make them take that decision. And the pain which will be involved in Brexit no doubt will make some people come to that decision. But we're trying very, very hard not to put that pain on the people. We're trying to avoid this no-deal Brexit and lessen it. If it happens and people feel the pain and because of that they come to independence, that's quite a sorry situation. I'd rather people just stood back now, looked at what was coming down the tracks and said to avoid that pain before we're there, let's be smart now.
That makes sense. It's a difficult question for Scotland. How will we be impacted as well? Obviously, we're not just fighting against... I think the case for independence must have changed anyway, but we're now fighting for the survival of the entire country because we will be dragged down with the entirety of the rest of the country, or at least it feels like that.
And we can see historically we're an afterthought. Boris's great statement, £1 spent in Croydon is worth more than £1 spent in Strathclyde, as he said at the time. That's still his mentality. So their focus is basically London, the surrounding southeast and the northeast of England and Wales. They'll suffer as well. The first area to feel it will be the poorest areas, and it will take a long time before it permeates through, and the people with wealth are actually beginning to understand that it's going to affect them, maybe not immediately, but in the long term as well. And Scotland and the other countries in the UK and the regions within England will suffer more and quicker than the southeast of England.
I mean, the agricultural area and land in Scotland is obviously a very diverse kind of diverse plate of different things, and money's made off of it in different ways. Agriculture is one half of it, but there is a large part, I think a portion of about 20% that are given over to grouse moors. That kind of distribution of land will be affected differently because different subsidies are being paid by the EU currently, and from all the things that we've seen so far, we can't trust the UK government to actually replace subsidies that are currently being paid by the EU. There will be other financial needs that will need covered, and with the country in complete dive mode, it's going to be interesting to see where that money gets spent. So I think maybe in Scotland we are going to see a very few of the very most wealthy that are actually going to feel the impact of Brexit quite severely, quite quickly. How do you feel about that?
Well, the land ownership and land use in Scotland is a massive topic in its own right. There's an opportunity here that maybe we can do something about that. Our grouse moors the right thing to utilise our land on, in the current scale, in a smaller scale, or not at all. There's issues there. The land of Scotland has been completely changed over centuries as to how we used to use it. Areas have been deforested, grouse was put in there, but there's very strong arguments that we can replenish those, we can bring back things which are better for the environment, but there is the case of it has to sustain jobs, it has to be beneficial to the country at large, rather than just a handful of very wealthy people that own a vast amount of land within Scotland.
this is correct, and I think from what we understand, the way that the land is capped in order to upkeep the grouse, it's kept in a very deplenished state deliberately. If every other way of treating that land would actually generate more wealth, it wouldn't require subsidies, it would acquire wealth for the country as well as for the soil, which is one of the really important things if we're heading into climate change. And with this Green New Deal on the cards, this is an area of policy where I see that, where I hope to see some progress. How do you feel about that?
Well, the peat bogs and stuff that used to be there, obviously were been drained, they were much better for the environment than what we've currently got. So going back to that sort of biodegradable fuel, but it has to be done on an industrial scale. So it's not a sort of ideology where we say, let's have the wild green pastures of Scotland and it'll all be beautiful. And it has to be something which can feed into the economy of the country and done effectively as well. But we know there are diverse types of fuel which can be used, and we know that Scotland is blessed with sufficient rain to keep things growing, and we also get occasional sunshine as well. In fact, we complain constantly about our weather, but we've got a climate which we can grow and sustain biodegradable fuels and look at biomass as part of a much larger renewable sector. It's not one thing. I like biomass fuels, but I know we're not going to do enough for
diversification
all.
is
so
key.
We need to bring on onshore wind, offshore wind, and again, onshore wind farms within Scotland have been effective, and we should have more of them in the right places because they can mix nicely with the local fauna and flora. Luckily, I've got one where you can go and you can walk through and you can cycle through, and you can get kids for a walk in it, and kids go there and they learn about the land, they learn about plants, they learn about wildflowers, and it becomes part of the society as well. Yeah, it's a wind farm, and it's actually putting energy into the houses as well. That's a long, long way from having a grouse moor, where a handful of people walk over shooting birds for a few weeks of the year.
I completely agree, and I think this is related very remotely, but it is related to Yellowhammer because we're talking about sustainability. Our communities able to sustain themselves. We're talking about food shortages, fuel shortages. There's going to be an awful lot of impact on people on a daily basis. So not having a locally sustainable energy scheme or having the food locally available, all these things are an opportunity. This might be a minor upset in the context of what we are heading into in the next century in terms of climate change and how we respond to this and what policies come out of this time, I think will really either advantage us or disadvantage us from how we meet the future in the next couple of years.
I'm all for local fuel. I've got a resolution coming through SAB conference, in fact, for a Scottish Energy Agency, and that would be an agency which can advise local communities as to how they can best utilise their land to create local energy, and if there's a surplus of it, they can then feed into a grid. But rather than this attitude that says one size fits all, we have to look at the age and say, what you got in my constituency of Inverclyde, we've got a lot of hills, we've got a lot of water. We used to have hydro energy, we've got none now. 100 years ago, 120 businesses all running off of hydro energy. Now we haven't got any at all, but the structure is still there. So it would make sense to say, let's utilise that, capture that, and create energy in Inverclyde. What I need is experts to come along and say to me, that's actually plausible. That's just a harebrained idea you've got there, and then work with. And we've got Clyde. We've got tides that come and go. But how much energy can I create that far up the Clyde? Maybe better further down in North and South Ayrshire. And then again, we've got the reverse technology where you can generate heat out of the river itself. So getting a mix of all that seems to me a great idea. But when an energy agency who've got the expertise to come to Inverclyde and say, what you want is this mix, and then go across the water to Argyll and Bute and say, what you guys have got here, slightly like that, but it's more like this, and then go to city centres like Glasgow and say, you've got different opportunities here, solar power on top of buildings, whatever it is, this will work for you. So the energy generated locally will differ from place to place, different communities, but feed into that community, keep the lights on, and if required, feed back in like it.
That sounds fantastic, and it's the right approach. I think a lot like in agriculture, if we focus on one crop, the chances of failure for that one crop are extremely high. If you diversify your crop, you're able to sustain a multitude of disasters that affect different crops and still end up with some crops. And I think the same kind of goes for society and for energy and for pretty much all things in life. A diversity adds to the whole, and it doesn't subtract from it.
And while we're there, let's grow some hemp.
All for it.
We might come to that later on.
Let's do that. Looking forward to that part of the programme. This is actually quite an interesting area. Your job consists of trying to be as effective in a very, let's say, outdated system of government. And I'm personally interested in how you cope with the mental health aspects of being in a job that must be that immensely frustrating. I can hear that you put your energy into things that give you purpose and have a good reason and will do something to better the overall picture. But for you personally, how do you cope with situations that are personally challenging?
It comes with the territory, and I think first and foremost, accepting the fact I applied for this job. Nobody forced me into this situation. So I went in with my eyes open to an extent. But until you're there and you understand all the nuances of as you say, the pressures that are put upon you, and I don't want to moan about it and complain about it, because being a member of Parliament for Inverclyde, where I was born and brought up, it's a huge honour and a privilege. I genuinely love what I do. I love my job. But yeah, of course, there are days when you think, you're here, you're there, you work very, very hard, and then think, I've not achieved anything at all. And that's the issue for me, trying to see what we're actually getting out of all the hard work, not just me, my team in my office, and I see them working hard. So they get casework which comes in, so you can say, well, I fixed that case for that person, we got them a tax rebate, we got them better housing, we got what they came looking to us for. It's harder at my level to say we've actually made that happen, but the belief that things will improve and understanding that you're doing the best job you're capable of doing. But the mental health aspect of it is it's been able to self-discipline, where you do things like switch off your phone, get off of social media, spend that time. We're all more and more aware of mindfulness. That's an idea where I cannot change the world overnight, so don't leave my phone on overnight, because it will ping at some point and someone will give you a message, or someone will, and then it starts your brain going again. You have to be able to back off at some stage and just give yourself some time. Now that's easier said often than done. But for first week down at Westminster in 2015, somebody pulled me aside, I had no idea who it was, and said, while you're down here, he said, every day, take a walk across the park, and at least once a week, take in a show. Well, I've not found a park yet, but I know it's out there somewhere.
Okay.
But I know I can go back to my office, and I can, and I do sit there, switch things off, listen to some music, and I try to start my day like that, so I'm in the office early, before you actually get up and go to the chamber. Just have a moment to yourself, to sort of say to yourself, appreciate the great things you've got in life, and understand the upside of it, and energise yourself. But right now I'm just back for a week's holidays, so I'm feeling pretty chilled.
Excellent. That's a great way to come back. Yeah. But it is true, I'm not talking about complaining. Every job is difficult, but your job is a particularly difficult, and one that not many of us have the opportunity to experience. With transferable knowledge.
Sorry?
With transferable knowledge, the transferable knowledge about how to discipline yourself, it is important. You, if your job is to respond to the news, and the news are as harrowing as they have been for the last, at least 3.5 years, I think it really can get to you, and this is something that you don't just suffer in your professional life, though you have to stand it professionally, and you have my condolences for that specific aspect. But a lot of campaigners out there, a lot of people interested in politics, the everyday man and woman and teenager on the street are involved in this as well, and I think they also have to learn to look at their mental health and see how to shield themselves.
And it's also like, I get a lot of abuse on social media and stuff like that, and I don't tend to read it. But people will say to you, have you seen this? And they put it in front of you and go, okay, thanks very much for that.
Thanks
and
you
read it, and you can take that personally. I always try to engage with people who do that and give them the opportunity to come and meet me. Sit down and have a cup of tea and we can chat about this. Very, very few ever do.
Yeah.
They will avoid me when in the supermarket. They'll cross the road to avoid me if I'm walking through the town centre. But late at night, usually on social media, they'll like go at me and call me for everything under the sun. And you've just got to put that in the context of the life these people are living. And their desperation maybe to make a difference themselves, to reach out and to get to someone who they think can make this huge difference. They think they can tell me, you get that done, and it'll make getting that done is not as easy. And believe you me, I'm trying to get the good things done. And it's that sort of understanding. And when we actually sit down across the table with somebody face to face to explain the harassment aspect of it, but also the frustration that you feel and the loops I have to jump through to make the simplest things happen, then the vast majority of people will take that on board and understand that.
I brought this topic up because this week we had a really unfortunate news about Owen Jones being attacked while he was out, and it seemed to him, it at least seemed like a premeditated attack by 4 adult males, which he ascribed to online popularity and generally the border between reality and people's frustrations just slowly wearing away. I think, first of all, our condolences are due. That's a terrible thing to happen, to get beaten up in the street. It's probably going to rob you of more of than just the moment there and the pains that you have to go through to heal, but also makes you look over your shoulder.
Of course it is. When in my office I carry a panic button. I don't want to, but the police have advised me to carry a panic button. And what other life of a job is that sort of prerequisite of what you've got to do? And not just me, but my staff. And we're doing constituency surgeries out and about. We're doing the same thing. Just for that off chance that something terrible happens, I say, but the vast majority of people will not engage you in that way. They're quite civil with you and the understanding, but there is a fringe. And yes, within my own office, we've had a few people where the police have had to come and remove from the office because they get very agitated. But quite often, there are people with mental health issues as well. And I don't know this particular people are responsible for attacking Owen Jones. It seems to be more premeditated than that, and a very deliberate thing. Whereas I get people in my office who will get upset about something and angry about something, and it's not, they haven't come there to cause me damage. But in a very emotional sense, there can be outbursts, and we have to be cautious of that as well. But MPs were much higher profile than I.
Yeah.
Get no peace at all. I see it. And it's awkward when you can't catch a flight, you can't go to pictures at night, you can't do so. Somebody come up to you and not just say, hi, how you doing? But you're this, you're that. Why have you not fixed all this? Yeah.
Do you perceive any difference in how female MPs are treated as opposed to male MPs? I can see that you're both getting abuse.
There's a lot of misogyny around, and there's a lot of attitude. So I'm sure they get it worse than most males do. Not all, but I'm sure than most. And there's an element that will always be critical of women, I guess, and think it's a male position to put down, to criticise. That happens with the LGBT community. It happens people will pigeonhole somebody and have an issue with them and go after them, and sometimes simply being female in politics is enough for people to have a go at you.
Yeah. I think being a politician in general is something that isn't a very, it's not a very aspirational job for many, just because of how their communities perceives it as a job. When I first came to Scotland, I arrived in Inverclyde in Greenock, and the people that I met there were very much disillusioned and disenfranchised. I believe that because this is 12 years ago now.
So this is before I was elected.
Way before. I can see how independence campaign won, and the kind of tickling of ants and movement underneath the curtains for the last 3 years have really changed the engagement. But can you see that in Inverclyde too, that people are differently engaged than you expected them to be?
They're certainly engaged. Going through the Yes movement, we went from 26% to 49.9% and lost about 86 votes. But people have kept that engagement there. We've got a new Yes shop opened just outside the West Station, the railway station, which has been thriving business right now, and people are engaged, people are coming in, and noticeably, and I've got less to do with it this time round than I did last time because I'm now an elected politician, but talking to the people who were running the shop yesterday, they actually made the point that people are coming in and sitting down and talking, and people who would not have had that conversation before. It's not just about independence, it's about politics in general. I think more people are certainly going to have that conversation the next time we go for IndieRef. That'll happen. And in general, I've been involved in my head in politics since I was 15, 16 years of age, probably before that. But I now find that when I go to schools to talk to kids doing modern studies, they are so engaged. They are so clued up. They are so involved. I was maybe one of a handful of kids in my school with sort of political views and worried about things that what we're going to do with our country and what have you. Now you go into schools and the kids are just absolutely, from my point, absolutely brilliant, and they really give me a hard time when I'm in there, which is fantastic. Yeah.
Excellent. This is actually something that we're starting to observe. I'm quite involved in going to different groups, and I'm quite well connected with other people who do the same, and the general feedback at the minute in the grassroots seems to be that everybody is incredibly clued up. The last couple of years have really been used to understand the issues that needed to be understood, and I think it's something really special to see. Maybe this is one of those moments where it helps to have a stranger's eyes, though 12-year-old stranger's eyes since I came to Scotland. But yeah, I can really see a big change in the general education, attitude and skills of the movement, which is fantastic, especially while we're in Inverclyde. And when I first came, it was such a disillusioned place with a fantastic history over multiple layers. especially shipbuilding.
Especially shipbuilding, yeah.
Or most recently shipbuilding, but this is something that brought Greenockians all over the world.
It's in our blood, whether we like it or not. It's a strange thing. The song of the Hammers Ding Dong is a song of the Clyde, and I'm living in Lower Clydeside, and shipbuilding is part and parcel of who we are and what we are. Even though the numbers have drifted away over the years, but still as a kid I remember growing up, the Clydeside was just awash with shipbuilders and shipbuilding men, and hard drinking, hard working men. And we took away the hard work for most of them.
Yeah.
That's how we got to a dissolution society in the first place. It takes a long, long time to build that back up again and give people back in pride in Inverclyde.
It does, because it didn't just trickle away. There was a very abrupt change in how the shipbuilders lost their jobs, and then there wasn't very much else to take up in Greenock and Port Glasgow and the surrounding areas. Now we're looking at Ferguson shipyards, and there was a very immediate response from the Scottish Government. Maybe you want to summarise the topic for us a little bit.
Well, they took very sharp action on Friday to take the company under government ownership, or currently under government management, is in the hands of the administrators, and they will guide us over the next 4 to 6 weeks to determine what the outcome is going to be. If during that time somebody wants to step forward and put forward to buy the yards, a viable proposition to make it a going concern again, then that will be considered by the Scottish Government. Unlikelihood, I think it's unlikely that will happen, in which case after 4 to 6 weeks it will become a state-owned shipyard. But the alternative is, the Scottish Government did not want to do this. They were quite happy to have a private-owned shipbuilding if it was doing the right things, but things got to a point, and that didn't happen quickly. That happened over a course of months, maybe even years or so, where things were just not happening to the time scale that they had to happen to. So it got to a point where we had to do something, or that company was going to go into administration, the gates were going to be padlocked, and in that situation nobody gets paid, suppliers don't get paid, the supply chain breaks down because people have to go furnishing other people, and people who are working through their apprenticeships would have not got to finish their terms. So that was just completely unacceptable, and the Scottish Government up front said, whatever happens here, we will protect the jobs. And that's what they've done. Whatever it takes, there will be a shipyard there, and we will work to make sure the yard is viable and that people are continue to be employed. And being there yesterday, Friday morning, and to see the look in the faces of the workforce when they were told their yard was going to be saved, it was something very, very special, because they've been working under an enormous amount of pressure for a long time. And talking later to a couple of the girls who are doing apprenticeships down there, fabricators, and they were saying, we've got a month to go. We could died right now. We've got a month still to go in our apprenticeships. We know we're now going to get to finish our apprenticeships. And whatever that takes them in the world to work, that's up to them. But to pull the rug from under their feet at this stage would have been criminal. So the Scottish Government have stepped in there and said, whatever happens, your jobs are safe. Where the longer term future of the yards is something we have to look at. What are we going to build? Who are we going to build it for? But if we'd padlocked those gates and walked away, we would not even be having that conversation.
And it's such a deeply ingrained part of Scottish history that the last few yards deserve protection. There are skills there that can be applied to much more than just ships. And these are fantastic ships, accomplishments of engineering and design and fabrication. So if we take that workforce, and where apparently there were quite a lot of shipping contracts or shipbuilding contracts that never came in, especially for the Ministry of Defence, if I recall correctly. These were not allocated to any of the Clyde manufacturers, but went to 2 different English locations.
It goes back to the argument we were promised a frigate yard, or shipyard, a frigate factory, that's what they called it, and it's just not materialised. Well, people plan long term. Building a ship's a long term thing. It's not you're manufacturing thousands of things per hour. You're making things which are going to take you 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever, to complete. You cannot take on other work where you think that work's coming down the pipeline. So it's a balancing act of going out there, tending for more work, making sure everybody's busy, and then not being able to fulfil what you've taken on board. So it's when Ferguson's were bought out in 2014, the average age of the workforce was something like 55, 56 years of age. And those were guys that left school at the same time as me. And that was when the last real influx of apprentices were taken on. So there's this huge skill gap. These guys were nearing retirement age, and we didn't have the skills coming in behind them We didn't have the skill set because we'd
Right.
stopped taking on apprentices. Unfortunately, over the last 4 years, we've built up a number of apprentices working through the yard. I think in general, the UK's attitude and Scotland's attitude has changed towards that, and we're building more and more. The Scottish Government has certainly invested heavily in apprenticeships to fill that skill gap. So we've got the skills now. We've got a shipyard which is fully skilled up, training people. It's got old heads there who've been for a long, long time. And that combination, that mix can still be a very, very powerful force.
Apprenticeships are quite usual where I come from. I was born in Germany, and the way that our apprenticeship system is set up, it can be something that runs even longer than a university degree would. It's a very focused and on-the-job kind of learning experience, and it obviously, if we look at the brand made in Germany, it produces very high-quality makers and producers, so I think it's definitely the right way to go.
It wasn't in Scotland up until about 1977, 78 when it just became not the thing to do. Everything was some form of further education, and you're looked down upon if you're going to go to the yards for an apprenticeships. And whenever you went to college, did courses which maybe didn't take them as far as they thought they'd take them.
Well, in my brain, I look back and I see the 80s looming just over that time, and everybody looking to the bankers that were not really doing anything with their hands, anything skilled like that, but intellectual jobs. So it's quite interesting how that has changed over the years. I'm glad that the Scottish Government is moving in the other direction. I think this is something where sustainability is really important.
Manufacturing and agriculture is the lifeblood of a country, and we're very fortunate in Scotland that we've got a climate where we can have both of those things. Other countries, different sets of problems, but in Scotland we can have high level of agriculture and a high level of manufacturing, and that should be the actual core of what this country is.
Good. We have a newly, maybe almost already owned by the Scottish Government shipyard now to look out for. What do you envisage happening other than building ships that could be done with that kind of skilled workforce?
Well, you're putting me in the spot there. I mean, where are we going to go with this shipyard? The important thing is that obviously I aspire to Scotland being an independent country. We're going to have to build ourselves a navy in the first place. Fleet patrol, border patrols, the shape of Scotland, the coastline we've got, ships are first and foremost what we've got to do. But to talk about marine technology, there's offshore wind farms. A lot of that technology to onshore also transfers over. We can look at tidal power, so again we get into the renewable sector. So anything that happens on water, whether it be barges or bridges or boats, you've got skill set there, we can build it because we've saved it. And I think in an independent Scotland, the importance of that shipyard will be even more apparent to people.
I think you're right about that, especially because Scotland is known for its intellectual education in terms of going to universities and fantastic schools. But Scotland has a very proud history of producing, manufacturing, designing products and services and infrastructure. And that is something that an independent Scotland could really push in the context of an independent sustainability kind of plan. Maybe something that should already be on the way. And where we're waiting for the Green New Deal to become a bit more concrete action, we'll see how that plays out.
We're looking at a national infrastructure company for Scotland as well. That's planning on like a 20-year strategy, which is again hugely important because of the size of things we know we need to build. And Scotland's in this process of redesigning ourselves as the country we want to be in the 21st century.
Definitely. You, as a resident, are you a Greenokian by birth?
I'm a Greenokian by birth, yeah.
Congratulations. You're somebody with a proud history of having a historical neighbour, James Watt.
Indeed, I nearly wore my James Watt tie today and I didn't. I wish I had now.
You should have. When you come to Broadcasting Scotland, come prepared to be confronted with your local history. I went to the Science Museum in London and was really surprised. This is a good while ago with a Greenokian friend of mine, and we walked in and were very surprised to find that there was a whole section on James Watt. So
his effect around the world was massive. I mean, what he did was a steam condenser, which made steam engines economically viable. And once people latched onto that, it pretty much fueled the Industrial Revolution. Now, hindsight, we can look back and say, maybe we could have done things slightly differently here. But what it did was it completely changed the face of manufacturing and the countryside as well, where people became impoverished and moved into the cities, so it didn't all go swimmingly well. But James Watt's inventions and his influence on industry in the United Kingdom and across the globe is never to be underestimated.
James Watt is kind of an icon of the Industrial Revolution, not just for Scotland, but in terms of a giant leap made for mankind at the time and for the future, but on ground, on Earth. We're moving on and are over 100 years, well over 100 years later. If James Watt was here, what do you feel he would be interested in an area in? Because I suspect we're not talking about engineering anymore. The Industrial Revolution has carried us quite far, and we're quite far in that way, but I suspect that it's got something to do with social policy that he would be interested in. Do you think he could put his mind to that kind of
James
thing?
Watt, would he? I don't know that enough about James Watt to say that. I think he'd be an engineer. I think he's an engineer to the core. I think he'd be looking at renewable energy. I think he'd be one of those guys who's got a garage somewhere who's building these fantastic things. And he's got
From what I understand, he was a polymath, so you would never just be interested in one thing.
Yeah,
and it seems like
but I think,
the kind of thing that he picked up with creating a steam compression engine, or at least the basic start of that, is something that really revolutionizes and has taken over. He thought, how can we make this an awful lot better? How can we stop wasting energy on this? I think where we are now, we are still wasting an awful lot of energy, but in a different area, and it doesn't take industrial revolution. I'm interested. I wonder how he would feel about the social policies, and if there's anything monumental on the horizon that he might be interested in. You're not agreeing with me, are you?
I'm not really sure about that. I'm honest. James Watt's father was a slave owner.
Yes.
Yeah? So there's a generational thing. So he must have been close to that. And so would his views have been about the eradication of poverty? Would you be looking to things like universal basic income? Would you have been going down that path?
I hope so.
I hope so as well, but I've never...
I reckon the people of Greenock would have something to say to him if he didn't.
I think the people of Greenock would have something to say to him, but I've always perceived James Watt as an invention, as an engineer, as a creator of a range of things, and most famously the steam condenser.
I like that he's still an icon for Greenock, but I'm looking forward to see what other icons come out of Inverclyde over the next couple of decades. There, you've got quite a lot of them. You yourself are making quite the steps and making calls for Greenock and Inverclyde.
I don't ever see a statue going up for me.
Wait, we'll make you a teeny tiny statue and it will sit on the waterfront, washed around by the waves. Right, so talking about more local politics in Scotland, there's been an ongoing myth across the UK that Scotland is this drug-infested place, addicted to smack and subsidies, essentially. Yep. There have been interesting news about the statistics in Wales and England, and these are quite sad statistics.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it?
Well, we cannot shy away from the fact that we've got a massive problem in Scotland. We cannot shy away from that at all. The last figure showed 1,817 drug-related deaths in Scotland, which per head of population is horrendous. It is a health crisis. Other people have got other problems, other countries, not within the UK, but that's not to shy away from what we've got to do to fix our problem as well. But yeah, it was very interesting. This is where politics gets difficult, because when the Scottish figures were released, the Scottish Tories were very quick to start pointing the finger at the Scottish government and say, these figures are terrible, what are you going to do about it? Last week, the figures for Wales and England came out, and they're terrible as well. These are not just statistics. Behind every one of those is a person who's died, a family that's been affected in sometimes the most gruesome of ways, and yet I'm hearing nothing of this. All I'm hearing from down south is we're going to double down on crime. We're going to arrest people. We're going to arrest people who are producing it and distributing it. We're going to arrest the kids that are involved in the county lines. And we've tried this for the best part of 50 years, and it hasn't worked. And that really concerns me, because unless they change their mindset and they start looking at drug-related harm as a health issue, and they keep going down the criminal justice line, it's only ever going to get worse. And the police are in a very difficult situation as they work within the confines of the laws that we give them. And we say, that's what you've got to do. So that's what they're good doing. But talking to a number of people who are currently in the police force, have left the police force, are in the border patrols, and the people who are at the front line of fighting this war on drugs, if we still use that phrase, they're saying, we've got to do something different here. Yeah,
absolutely.
Neil Wood's Good Cop, Bad Boy wrote a book, and he spoke about 14 years as an undercover police cop right at the front line, putting his life on the line to put serious criminal gangs away. And at the end of it, he said, not only did I not make it better, I actually made it worse. And for him to stand up and say that, it's a big, big statement. There's a lot of people, Jim Duffy at Strathclyde Co-op, is saying the same sort of thing, where we have to change our attitude to how we police drugs in our society if we're ever going to get to a situation where we can engage with the people who are doing themselves harm and stop them from getting to the situation where they're dying of a drug overdose. And if you look at that 1817, the people who died, that's poly-drug use. It's not someone who takes a line of coke every so often. Yeah? It's not someone even who's injecting heroin. It's somebody who's using a multiple of drugs. If you look at down the statistics, the benzodiazepines are in there, alcohol's in there. Alcohol is a psychoactive substance and it's a drug, but it's socially acceptable drug in Scotland and across the world pretty much to use it. But we've got a different attitude when it comes to people who take different drugs, which we made illegal in 1971. And we've got to turn that around and say, if you're putting something in your body to change the chemical makeup of your brain to make you feel differently, why are you doing that? And if you're doing that and you're comfortable with it and you're not harming anybody else, then why am I arresting you and putting you in prison? You want to take somebody away from drugs, don't put them in prison. Prisons are awash with them. You want to put them in the hardened criminals. The criminals who run the drugs learned this in the 1970s and early 80s by people who were casual users who were put in prison. And the gangsters were saying, what is that stuff? And they explain it to them. So how much does it cost? And they explain to them. These guys saw a business venture. So they started controlling the development and the distribution and the cost and the marketplace. And they've been doing so for a long, long time. And if you're a drug dealer with your territory, and I want into your territory, you're going to interact with violence. And I'm going to interact with more violence. And it escalates and escalates until one of us is dead. That's the deal. And that's happening across the globe. You can diffuse that by decriminating or legalising drugs. You don't have, as somebody said before me, you don't have the chief executive officer of Heineken driving around in a blacked out 4x4 shooting at the CEO of Guinness. It simply doesn't happen. It's bad for their marketplace. So there's a lot we can do, but it's that mindset that says this is a health issue, not a criminal justice one. And the Home Office are entrenched in this attitude that says, oh no, we are going to come down hard on criminals. It doesn't work. It doesn't mean you don't prosecute people who are breaking the law. That's not what we're saying. And I'm also not saying drugs are great and everybody should have them. But the stats show us people are dying and will continue to die, and those numbers are only going to get bigger and worse year in, year out until we do something about it. And that means get people into things like drug consumption rooms where you can engage with them at a health level and say, what's your problem, what can I do to help you? And then you stop that person becoming the criminal further down the line, stealing to fulfill their habit.
Absolutely. We are currently still as a society treating drug addiction as if it is the core problem, but is usually a sort of symptom of what is socially not being fulfilled, what is lacking in their lives. And as a society, we have a responsibility to deal with that.
If you look at problematic drug use, 90% of the people have been sexually, physically or psychologically abused at some stage. And if you look at a heat map of just the United Kingdom or even Scotland and say where is the biggest drug abuse and deaths, and you look at a heat map of poverty, they're the same map. That's not a coincidence.
Absolutely. And it requires more than what is happening at the minute. We're good at now understanding where the problems lie because that's where the bodies are.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not that good at being able to create comprehensive policy without having power over all the areas that we require powers over.
And we've got the rank hypocrisy of government ministers who in the past have said, oh yeah, I take cocaine or I did smoke opium or whatever it was, chap Stewart said he'd taken. There's a range of these people, and that's people who are standing up and saying I did it.
Yeah.
Let's put everybody in the line and ask them what they've taken in the past and ask them why they're now keeping that illegal for other people. Because I don't take any of this stuff. I'm not saying drugs are great and people should use them, but we have to get the reasons why are people taking them in the first place. And I don't in a situation where kids just leaving school or maybe are just going to their first music festival and someone offers them a tab with something and they take one tab because they want to make something. They're told it's MDMA and I'll keep you awake all night, you can dance all night to all the bands, you can enjoy the light shows and stuff like that, because that's what it does, it just keeps you awake. And that one tab kills them because it's been made in some garage somewhere in Paisley by a bunch of crooks who don't care who's taking it. You know?
As a former resident of Paisley, I take that very personal.
Well, I was quoting a precise case there, actually, not to blame anybody else. But Anthony Eden took uppers, he took Purple Hearts during the Suez Crisis to keep him up, to keep him awake, because he had to be. It was okay for him, it was okay for Queen Victoria to take cocaine, it was okay to send these things out to guys in the front line in the First World War. You go to Harrods and buy a tin
Absolutely.
to send out to people.
It's a
changed
completely...
their attitude in 1971 and criminalised it all. And because of that, there's a lack of education, a lack of support. It's bad that it's pushed aside. That's not good enough for kids growing up. They're going to go out and try it. If we educate them properly, well, they won't even bother trying it because they can see the damage it can potentially do.
Well, and education either way is what is most important, that there is a support system around, not the opportunity to fall through the cracks at every single step of the way of your recovery or your attempt to stay out of that kind of business. Legalisation is obviously a big topic, but requires more powers than Scotland currently possesses, because one of the main points here is financial support, and financial support currently comes through the DWP, which is not an area that is devolved to the Scottish Government, no matter who sits in power at that point.
But the cost of putting the help in early is cheaper than having to pay for the sort of medical requirements in the NHS later, and it's cheaper again than paying for the judicial system as the end product. So
Absolutely.
Actually early intervention is effective, and if you're only interested in the spreadsheet, if you don't give a damn about the people, but you actually want to save money, put the money in early intervention in education and support.
I couldn't agree more. We have an issue with supporting different groups that are becoming marginalised, even groups that make up the majority of our demographic pyramid. Our pensioners and those people requiring care are in really dire straits. We've just had the announcement that the Tories are considering to raise the pension age up to 75 years. I know this is going to be sounding slightly
How do you do your job as a nurse? 75 years of age.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like my initial question was how many more people can we expect to die while in work on that statistics, and it turned out, I think we calculated something around 80,000 people in England and Wales just from raising the age of retirement. I have no words. Do you have any?
Well, we're looking at it from the wrong... Again, we're looking at it from the wrong perspective. This idea that people have to work longer in their lives... This whole idea of how do we measure the success of our society? Yeah? Is it GDP, or is it a wellness type thing? Is it a mental health issue? Is it about being supportive? Is it about communities? Or is it all about squeezing out the maximum we can get for people, like their sort of working units? Work them till they die.
Yeah. The amount of milk has now been produced.
That's your contribution to society. You started working when you were 17 and you worked till you were 75, and I enjoy my job. A lot of people do enjoy their job. I'm not doing this when I'm 75, I'll tell you that.
And shouldn't the aim be overall? I mean, for decades since the Industrial Revolution, we've been promised a social revolution that comes along with the industrial progress. Growth should have brought some social progress, but it hasn't. We're still aiming for a 5-hour-a-day week.
I don't see this across the world. Pensions, by and large, across the world are far better than they are in the United Kingdom. We have going back to the drug issue. We've marginalised and stigmatised people. We're also seem to be doing this with older people. And I say that very carefully because I'm nearly 60. But older people, in the aspect that they're just not part of the mainstream society anymore. They're sort of in the fringe on the corner of an eye.
Such a waste.
It's supposed to be something which we can learn from, and they can nurture younger generations, and we can
have the opportunity to create
society.
community while everybody else is at work. Absolutely, I agree. I mean, the UK is the worst payer of pensions in Western Europe.
Yeah.
I believe the pension in Germany is almost twice as high. I remember actually being at a talk in, I believe, Kelso last year, and somebody pointed out that their father went to Greece, and when they arrived in Greece with a British pension, the Greek broken state, being on the last legs, offered them a subsidy of about €200 a month because they didn't deem this person fit to be able to survive on that little money.
Yeah.
At that point, really, we can only shake our heads and be stunned. How do pensioners survive in the first place?
We know there's no magic money tree. I'm sure somebody told me that a while ago.
Yeah.
And suddenly, aimed towards Brexit, there's a magic money tree where we can spend money where we want to spend money on. And a personal hobby of us, obviously, would be Nuclear armory was money there to spend when we can make the excuse for making it, for spending it. But things like the WASPy campaign, their pension been taken from them, as you say now, trying to extend the age for people to retire. The money is there if we want to make it there. We have to make cuts elsewhere. There's areas where HS2 has cost us £10 billion over
I get that.
10 years, and we've got nothing to show for it yet.
Well, my suspicious immigrant brain immediately hears pensions and goes, no wonder that you're going to have to put up the pension age, because you're losing all the EU citizens that work for you and pay the taxes more than on average a British person does over their lifetime. So I'm not surprised that I'm feeling slightly smug and facetious about this. But since we're coming to a topic here, what do we spend money on and what don't we spend money on? The universal basic income got mentioned a bit earlier in the programme, and I still think it's a point worth discussing, especially in relation to pensioners.
Well, a UBI, unconditional or universal, we seem to have a bit of a debate over the naming of it. The important thing is it's unconditional and it's universal, so it's not means tested and everybody gets it. It's basic, it's not giving a life of luxury, but it's basic. And it stops people falling through a trap into poverty, and also gives people a choice as to what they do with their life. They can't be pushed into 0 hours contracts jobs. They can't be pushed into jobs they don't want to do. Obviously, these jobs obviously exist, but they'll be paid a salary which will reflect the fact that maybe they're unpopular jobs, so people will take them on if that's a choice you want to make with your life, as people do. But an unconditional basic income has been trialled. We're looking at trialling it in Scotland, in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Fife and North Ayrshire. And right now the Scottish Government's put out £250,000 to fund a feasibility study, or to decide how the feasibility study should actually be run. Because there's no point in doing this and taking people under this umbrella of UBI and saying, this is what you've got to live on, that's it, you've got no other payment, live. If we can't at the same time extract the information on how it's affecting people and what they're doing with their lives, so at the end of any trial there has to be a period where we've been gathering information, pertinent information, and that information can then be analysed later. We've also got to hand those people back in to the existing system. We don't want them turning up for a benefit and people say, well, where have you been for the last 2 years? I've been in UBI. What's that? You've not ticked those boxes, and people are then dumped. So the whole scheme from beginning to end, what we put into it and what we expect to get out of it has to be properly designed, because there have been a number of these things across the globe, and some of the results are up for scrutiny and are not great because we ran at it. We wanted it up running straight away. So we're taking our time in Scotland to do the feasibility of what a pilot scheme should look like. But
it's very difficult to implement from what I understand, because again, some of these people involved in this study will be dependent on the payments from the DWP, an area which isn't devolved, and so it requires communication with the DWP. There's a lot of areas like that. Will an absent area in your CV affect you negatively? And what happens if you have somebody stabilised who cannot afford to continue the education and other positive steps they've taken with the money that they've received over that period and then has to drop out?
Yes. Yeah.
We don't want to leave anybody
worse off. So those are the technical issues we have to address before we actually... So we want to do it, we want to make sure we do it properly. So it's not just, look at us, aren't we trying to do the right thing? It's we actually are doing the right thing, and we're doing it the right way.
It's very difficult to say what the right thing is. Even studies done in other countries and on other continents are not applicable, even if they're similar-sized nations. Maybe they will not have included all the factors, even the design of how to conduct a study like that. And this is why the price tag shouldn't be all that surprising. It's quite complex.
It is very complex, which is why we're taking our time, and we're going to do it properly so that we can benefit from any pilot schemes running in Scotland. I believe in UBI. I've seen aspects of it work, so I think it should work. But if we run a pilot scheme and it goes horrendously wrong, and if there are things that come out of the woodwork we'd never conceived of, well, that's what pilot's for. We're then going to say, well, is that a game? Is that a stopper? Or is there something we've got to do a workaround? Do we tweak it? Can we change it? Can we make it work? But that's what pilot schemes are for. And pilot schemes are difficult because they're pilots. It would actually be easier to do across the entire country. But because it's a pilot, it brings with it its own difficulties as well. But I'm proud to say that the Scottish Government's prepared to take on that challenge.
It's good that there's a group working on this specific issue. I'm sure it didn't take a lot of convincing of the membership, because from what I can tell from going around Scotland, the membership is extremely involved with this and is happy to take it on board and is looking forward to see it. But I can also see the impatience. The pensioners obviously are in a very difficult time of this, because they might never get to see the benefits of the work that is being done now. And in that context, while pensioners would in many ways benefit tremendously more than they do of the current pension system, at least the one that was set up by the UK, this is something that is for a future generation to potentially benefit from. So
that's what we should be doing. That's what politicians should be doing. We should be making things better for generations to come. If we just concentrate on I thought I was on a 5-year fixed term parliament. Apparently that means absolutely nothing at all. I could get my third general election in the course of 4 or 5 years. But what politicians should be doing is we should be trying to improve things for future generations to come. And if we all adopted that attitude, then things would gradually get better and better and better. But we don't. We go down this 4 or 5 year attitude to get re-elected 4 or 5 years later down the line. And that's an issue with something like UBI, because it is a long-term strategy.
The long-term strategy, like many other strategies. Yeah. I'm looking forward to see what comes out of Scotland in the next couple of years, but one thing's for sure, we distract ourselves almost with thoughts of an independent Scotland, while Brexit is forcing all of us into being more careful and trying to monitor ourselves and seeking time away and having constructive health breaks. I hope that all of you out there are doing the same thing, because it's what we need to do to keep this going for the long run. Talking about keeping things going in the long run, we're coming to the end of our programme, and thank you very much, Ronnie, for coming along and having a chat with me.
Pleasure.
We here on The Full Scottish have enjoyed being with you, and we're about to finish the programme off. But before that, I'd quite like to ask you to, if you're able to, become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland. We're trying to keep the lights on here in the studio and bring you special conversations, guests and the news from around Scotland and further afield. And if you can support us, then I hope you'll find somebody who can, because we really appreciate your help. Have a good day, and we wish you a good week to come. Bye.